This is our third installment, I believe, of studying the Kena Upanishad, and in the context of the occasional class on Upanishadic meditation. And so let's start with the peace chant. Let's chant it together. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitam astu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Read the translation together. Om, may we be protected together. May we be nourished together. May we acquire strength together. May our learning shine forth in our lives. May we not find fault with each other. Om, peace, peace, peace. So this traditional peace chant, as we chant every time, and as I love to remind us, this translation by Swami Yogatmananda emphasizes this togetherness. A saha, in each line it is there, saha, together. We are studying this together. May this study bring us the highest good. May we not only gain an intellectual understanding of it, but may we actually live it. May it manifest in our lives. And may we not find fault with one another. While yes, we all have our defects, but our aim is not to have dissension and disagreements, but rather together to come to the truth. So the Kena Upanishad is, the first chapter is a remarkable research into what is it, or who is it, that makes our whole life possible, that enables us to hear, to see, to smell, to taste. What is it that brings about the possibility for us to act? And it begins with a question. The disciple asks the question, who is it that directs my mind and all my senses? Who is it? And then the teacher gives the answer. As with so many Upanishads, it's a conversation between the guru and the disciple. And this wisdom is passed on from through the succession of teachers. And the idea of this class is that we use these mantras for meditation. In the Vedantic idea that the truth is first to be heard from the teacher, then it is to be understood and thought about, and then it is to be realized. How is it to be realized? Through nididhyasanam, through meditation. Now traditionally nididhyasanam is done on the Mahavakya, the short, the great phrase, the great powerful words indicating one's unity with, that one's true nature is Brahman, infinite consciousness, and nothing else. So Tat Tvamasi is one of the Mahavakyas. But here we're taking it with a little bit of a broader meaning, because we're going to take these verses as verses to meditate on, to not, so that they're not just intellectually understood, that we not only that we have the words, but that we internalize it, that it becomes a part of us, that these teachings really inform our whole lives. And they have the power, these mantras, Upanishadic mantras, have the power to awaken us to our true nature. That is always the purpose of life, according to Vedanta, according to Sri Ramakrishna and all the Vedanta teachers. The aim of life, the purpose of life, is to realize our true nature. So it's good to remind ourselves of that as we take up this study. Let's chant together the second peace chant, which is also a very, which is part of this Upanishad, a very important prayer for illumination. Om apyayantu mamangani vak pranashchakshushrotramatho balamindriyani cha sarvani sarvam brahmopanishadam maham brahma nirakuryam ma brahma nirakarot anirakaranam astu anirakaranam mestu tadatmani nirateya upanishatsu dharmas te mai santu Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om. May the different parts, let's read it together. May the different parts of my body, my tongue, prana, eyes, ears, and my strength, and also all the other sense organs be nourished. All indeed is Brahman, as is declared in the Upanishads. May I never deny Brahman. May Brahman never deny me. May there never be any denial on the part of Brahman. May there never be denial on my part. May all the virtues described in the Upanishads belong to me, who am devoted to Brahman. Yea, may they all belong to me. Om, peace, peace, peace. Actually, this peace mantra has a powerful declaration of Vedanta embedded in it, which is not called one of the Mahavakyas, but Sarvam Brahmopanishadam. Sarvam, everything, is Brahman, as is declared by the Upanishads. Sarvam Brahmopanishadam. And then this wonderful double prayer, may I never deny Brahman. May I never forget that Brahman is my true nature, that Brahman, this infinite consciousness, is my true nature, and the true reality behind everything that we see, that we experience, actually it's none other than Brahman. May we not deny that. And may Brahman never deny me. What does it mean? That's a good question. How can Brahman deny me? I don't know the answer to that. Now let's see if Swami Nikhilananda has any commentary on that. It may be just a poetic thought. Yes, he doesn't explain anything here. He just explains the Upanishad, not the peace chant. But then it goes on, and I don't like this translation very much. May there, this is anirakaranamastu, may there not be any denial. And then anirakaranam mestu, at least on my part, let there not be any denial. May I not deny this fact that sarvam brahma upanishadam. So let's, since this is a meditation, our aim is to deepen our meditation, let's take this peace chant as a meditation. And perhaps the whole thing is a little much, but what about this line? Sarvam Brahmopanishadam. This much we can take as our first meditation. And I'm just turning on a little timer so that I can see when to stop. Otherwise we could spend the whole time like this.
The meditation is just that everything is Brahman.
Well, I will leave it up to you. We're taking this first peace chant, which starts with a prayer for that our physical instrument may be strong, because our physical instrument, this is the instrument that we have to realize the truth, to realize who we are. This instrument of body and mind and senses, all these organs, let them be nourished. And then this declaration, we are in this prayer, we are declaring Sarvam Brahmopanishadam. We are declaring that this is the truth. And then we are saying, may I not deny this truth. May I not forget this truth that I've just uttered, that all is Brahman. May I not deny it. May Brahman also not deny me, which is impossible. Brahman is existence. How can there be any denial? But then it's a poetic prayer. So, may Brahman never deny me. May there not be any denial, at least on my part, no denial. And then finally there's a prayer for the virtues required for us to attain to the goal. These, which we discussed last week, also the sadhana chatushtaya and the all those sadhana shat sampatti and all those kinds of qualities that we're trying to do. But this is a beautiful thing. This is a beautiful meditation. Sarvam Brahmopanishadam Maham Brahma Nirakuryam. That much it encapsulates our whole project. All is Brahman. Everything, the only truth is Brahman, actually, and everything else is impermanent and falls away, and may we not deny that. So let's take that. And how do we meditate on a verse like this? Well, one way is simply to repeat it slowly, thinking of the meaning. We can take the English, or we can take the Sanskrit. I believe the Sanskrit carries a special power. And we can simply repeat those few syllables which express this highest idea. After that, we even are to go beyond the words, to simply manifest, to hold that truth in our hearts, internalize it, become it. So let's take this as our first meditation. Sarvam Brahmopanishadam Maham Brahma Nirakuryam. You have a question? Should we bring the microphone for questions? Ah, brilliant. So that anyone listening.
So my question is, I remember a lady wrote a letter to Swamiji that now I understand what you said, everything is God. And Swamiji said, I have never said such things, that everything is God. I said, God alone is, everything is not.
Right. Yeah, so, there's a subtle distinction. True. Well, everything is Brahman not in the sense that... okay, let's see if we can get this. And of course, you're referring to, actually, it's not a letter he wrote, but a poem. He wrote the poem, The Song of the Free, in which he states those powerful lines, not two nor many, 'tis but one. And thus in me all me's I have. I cannot hate, I cannot shun myself from me. I can but love. Not two nor, and then I can but love. From dreams awake, from bonds be free. This mystery, my shadow, cannot frighten me. Know once for all that I am He. So yes, and then Mary Hale says something like, thanks to remind us of the one truth, that all is He, or something like that, or all is God. And then he says, I never taught such queer thing, that all is God, unmeaning talking. True. Well, she came from the Christian Science background, and she was liable to take this universe itself as God. The beautiful sunset, the beautiful mountains. This is God. That's the mistake. Swamiji doesn't mean this is God in the sense that this universe is God. It's actually Brahman alone. It's a subtle distinction, because actually if Brahman alone is, this world is not. And yet, as we know from Sri Ramakrishna, when the person reaches the roof, then he or she finds that the roof is made of the same materials as the steps. So once we realize that our true nature as infinite consciousness, we find that everything we see is a manifestation of that consciousness, or a reflection in that consciousness. So in that sense, everything we see is Brahman. Everything, all is Brahman.
So this Sarvam Brahmopanishadam is from the second stage?
Right, you could say that would be the second stage. True, that's a nice way of thinking it. The state of the Brahmajnani. The first is the neti neti, and then there's the iti iti. But Sri Ramakrishna didn't generally encourage the practice of neti neti, of constantly denying what we see and denying our experience. Rather, he would say there's the path of negation, there's also the path of affirmation. That every one we see is a manifestation of God. Every living being is a manifestation of the divine. Even the mountains and the sunsets and all that, those are a manifestation of the divine. But we have to remember that it's the divine manifesting. It's not that is the divine. It is the divine, that infinite consciousness, which is manifesting through, shining through everything we experience. That's a good question. All right. So let's take, now in our previous classes we have handled we've gone up through the fourth verse, I believe. So actually now we are to begin with the fifth verse. Let's do a quick review. The disciple asks, Keneshitam, by whom, by whose will does all this happen? By whom, commanded and directed, does the mind go towards its objects? Commanded by whom? Kena. Who is doing all this? Does the life force, the prana, move? At whose will? Who keneshitam vacham imam vadanti? When people speak, who is impelling us to speak? What power is directing, is controlling our sight and our hearing? It's a wonderful question. Who is that? In other words, who am I? Is it me, or is there some God, or is there something else? And the teacher then replies in this kind of paradoxical language, which is trying to point us to the truth. Shrotrasya shrotram manaso mano yat. The ear, it is the ear of the ear. So it is not our ear which hears, it is the ear of the ear. What does that mean? It's trying to point out something which is really, we can't say in speech. It is that infinite consciousness. It is consciousness which allows us to hear. It is through Atman, through the self, our true nature as consciousness, that we can hear anything, or that we can see anything, or taste anything. Vacho hi vacham, vacho ha vacham, the speech of the speech. And we took this as a meditation. This is also, we take as a meditation, then it will become a little more clear. What does it mean, the ear of the ear? Well, this is the ear, but then within me there is the actual organ of hearing, which takes the little vibrations of the cilia in the ear. The air comes and goes into the ear and makes those little microscopic hairs vibrate. And that sends nerve impulses into the brain, and then there's a hearing. The real ear, the real organ of hearing, is inside the brain, and it translates those little vibrations of those hairs. How amazing! Into sound. Then it's presented to. Then we become aware of it. Now, who is we? How is it that we become aware of it? The ear of the ear. How is it that we're hearing? Who is that? Who? Still, it's a question, and we have to ask the question in order to realize it. It's not something that just can be told. Oh, well, that's you. That's consciousness. That's the true you. But yes, you have to realize it. That's why the meditation is so important. So the teacher points this out, and then points out further that the eye does not go there, the speech does not go there, the mind does not go there. It is not something that can be known, and yet it's not unknown. And of course, we discussed last time how that when we talk about knowledge, we always talk about we think of it in terms of an object. I know something. I know this book. I've read this book. I know it. It's just something separate from me, and I know it. And I know you. You're a person separate from me as a person, and I know you. So our true nature is not like that it's an object that I can know separate from me. And yet we can't say it's unknown, because to say it's unknown or unknowable would mean that one cannot realize one's own true nature. So it is also beyond the unknown. One can actually realize that one is the eternal subject, the eternal witness. This is the idea behind this verse number 4. So now we come to verse number 5. So we'll chant it together. We'll chant it bit by bit and study the meaning of the words. And then we take this as a meditation. Now, in the rest of the Upanishad, it's very interesting. Each of the next 4 verses, for next 5 verses, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9, the second line is the same. It's the same line. So it just gives a slightly different angle, each one. Yad vachanabhyuditam. That's a tough word, huh? Anabhyuditam. 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 And so it's yad, that, vachanabhyuditam. Yena vak abhyudyate. Tadeva brahma. Tvam vidhi. Nilam. Yad idam. Upasate. Okay. Yat. Yat means that. Huh? Yat, that. That which vacha, by speech, through speech, anabhyuditam. You can say anabhyuditam cannot be expressed or cannot be revealed or cannot be illumined. Different translations, but anabhyuditam, that means abhyuditam, expressed or revealed or illumined. Anabhyuditam, not expressed, not revealed. The ana is the negative. So, yad vachanabhyuditam, yena, by which, vak, speech, abhyudyate, is revealed, is illumined. Tad eva brahma tvam vidhi. You, tvam vidhi, know this, that is Brahman. That alone is Brahman. That by which speech is illumined, but which speech cannot illumine. Know that as Brahman. And not, na idam, not this, yadidam, which here people worship, upasate. Okay, let's chant it another couple of times, and then we'll discuss it a little more. Yad vachanabhyuditam, yena vag abhyudyate, tadeva brahma tvam vidhi. Nedam yadidam upasate. Yad vachanabhyuditam. Yena vag abhyudyate. Tadeva brahma tvam vidhi. Nedam yadidam upasate. Now together. Yad vachanabhyuditam yena vag abhyudyate tadeva brahma tvam vidhi nedam yadidam upasate. Good. A few repetitions and it starts going in. So we can read together this translation. Translations of Upanishads are very difficult because once you set it to English, then you sort of fix it in one meaning and you kind of lose some of the other possible meanings. That which speech does not illumine, but which illumines speech, know that alone to be Brahman, not this which people worship here. All right. How Sri Ramakrishna used to say that Brahman is the only thing which is not defiled by the tongue. In Indian tradition, anything which the tongue has touched becomes defiled. So, as you know, so it's like the part of the kitchen religion, or when eating, of course you eat with your fingers also, and so then your fingers you have touched your mouth, and then your fingers touch the plate, and so the plate becomes defiled also. And then you put that plate on a table, then that table is also considered defiled, as it were. You have to wipe it down before again you give somebody else food on that table or on that place, on the eating place. So that uchishta, that idea that once it's touched the tongue, it has become, and there's obviously some sanitary meaning in it also, as we know that germs are transmitted through saliva and all that. So even you could say that speech is defiled by the tongue because it's touched the tongue. But Brahman no one has been able to say what Brahman is. Therefore, it has not been defiled by the tongue. So it's a idea that speech cannot reveal our organ of speech, and yet it is Brahman, our true nature, infinite consciousness, which illumines speech, which when we speak, let's see what Swami Nikhilananda says about it, because it's speech is said to be, all speech arises out of Om. Om is the Shabda Brahman, the sound Brahman. Brahman manifests as sound, and then after that manifests as speech and as this universe. So every sound we express actually is found in Shabda Brahman. It's an expression of Shabda Brahman. It's an expression of Brahman. And so in that sense, speech is a reflection of Brahman. Speech is nothing but a manifestation of Shabda Brahman. Let me read what he has to say. The inert tongue can utter words only through the light and sentiency which are the true nature of Brahman. And let us remind us, Brahman, he describes it nicely, though you cannot describe Brahman with the tongue or with the words, but he says, Brahman is one and without a second, devoid of attributes, utterly transcendent, the supreme and a homogeneous mass of consciousness. So, it is consciousness which is, shall we say, that which makes it possible to speak and for us to understand speech. And then this second line of the mantra, which repeats again and again, this is Brahman. Know that this alone is Brahman, which illumines our speech, and not this which people worship here. That's a good question. What does it mean, this which people worship? The commentators say that the Upanishad is referring to various deities. We worship various deities which are envisioned as being separate from ourselves. And there's no separation. It's not something outside of ourselves. Brahman is our true nature. So when we are worshipping something separate from ourselves, then that's not Brahman. It occurred to me that we can take it also in a slightly different way. What do we all worship? That which we think about most, that which we seek most, that which we propitiate. What is that? Well, this world, all the material things, all the people. We propitiate someone to get a job. We propitiate someone else to get a wife or a husband. We seeking money. We can say that this culture is a money worshipping culture, and a fame worshipping culture. So that takes it to another step, maybe a step lower. What we worship here is matter. We worship matter. And consciousness is not a product of matter. Consciousness is the fundamental principle, who we are. Krishan, you had a question?
So can it be prana? So I was thinking, can it be prana that enables us to speak? Because even if there is a dead body lying there, that dead body cannot speak, but we cannot say that it is not consciousness. So I was trying to think, like, what is the role of prana in speaking?
Well, you can keep tracing it back, but at a certain point you have to stop. And where do you stop? I mean, yes, of course, prana is also involved in speech, and for us, the mind, of course, is involved in speech, and the tongue is involved in speech. But if we think about speech and we think about words, vak refers to more than just the tongue speaking. It also refers to that principle of speech that a word immediately brings to mind, if it's a known word, the object denoted by the word. And every object has a word attached to it. When we see an object, we immediately attach a word to it. And so it's on a very deep level of the mind or of our consciousness, we have this immediate association of word with object. And that's still subject-object relation. Can we take it back to the subject? That which cognizes a word, that which hears a word, that which thinks a word, that which wants to speak, express a word. And then where does all that manifest? How is that possible? I think this is something we should now do the meditation and take this line very slowly and see if we can get a glimpse into what the Upanishad, what the teacher is trying to tell us. Because remember, it started with who, by whose will. And it is Brahman alone which illumines speech, which by which speech is expressed, which reveals speech, which reveals vak. We should use the term vak, which reveals vak. And so it is consciousness which reveals vak. The meaning of words that can only unfold in consciousness. Let's chant it, and then quietly we'll read the chant, the Sanskrit, read the translation, then we'll have our meditation. Yad vachanabhyuditam yena vag abhyudyate tadeva brahma tvam vidhi nedanyadidamupasate. That which speech does not illumine, but which illumines speech. Know that alone to be Brahman, not this which people worship here. actually these 5 verses, they're very similar. They're all pointing us back within. What is it? Where our minds are always going out. As the Kathopanishad says, the senses are created in a defective way by pointing outwards, right? They've been damaged because they're going out, and that's why we don't realize who we are. And the wise seeker, as it were, closes the eyes, as it were, turns within, rather, and this is giving an instruction. How do we do that? How do we follow these different aspects of we follow these different organs, the organ of speech, we follow it back, to trace it back. Who is it that impels us to speak? Who is it that manifests speak? How is it that we can understand words? How is it that a word connects? When we hear the word cow, we immediately think of a cow. How is that possible? Where does that happen? And that happens in consciousness. It's consciousness that illumines that process. Otherwise, it's not possible. Similarly, the next one is going to be thoughts. The next mantra is thoughts. And then the 7th mantra is sight. The 8th mantra is hearing. And the 9th mantra is smell. So all the different ways that we interact with this world, the different ways we perceive, they're all pointing, the Upanishad is pointing out in each case, how is it that this is experienced? It's not the ear, which when the ear hears something, the ear is not hearing Brahman, and yet it is Brahman consciousness which enables the perception of a sound to take place. This reminds me of the practice of bhuta shuddhi in the puja, which is, we call it purification of the elements. And in this process, one is to take each one of these processes of perception through smell, taste, sight, touch, and hearing, and dissolve that perception into consciousness. And maybe that's why this already makes sense to me, because I've learned that that's actually a tantric procedure. But it's based on this kind of teaching, that consciousness is the fundamental principle, who we are. And all these experiences, it's a hint to tracing back that consciousness. When we see something, we see light, and ordinarily we just accept it. We're seeing light. But how is it that we see that light? Where is that perception taking place? When we hear a sound, there's a sensation of hearing something. How is it that that's taking place? If we're touching something, where are we experiencing that? In the finger? It's arising in consciousness. So go back. Go turn back, turn back, turn back. Let's take this next mantra, 6. Yan manasa namanute yenahur mano matam tadeva brahma tvam vidhi nedam yadidam upasate. Yan manasa, yat, in other words, that which by the mind cannot be thought or comprehended or grasped. Yan manasa na manute. By the mind, manasa, by the mind, it cannot be thought. But they say, and they say here, there's a little touch again to the wise, the realized souls. But they say, ahur, by which the mind thinks. Manaha, mano, matam. What the mind is able to think. And then the second line is the same as we had. Know that to be Brahman, and not that which people worship here, not any object, not any object. Let me read a little from Swami Nikhilananda. The seer sees an object because the seer is one and unchanging. Okay, he's pointing out the seer, that's us, our true nature. We see an object because we are unchanging. The various objects of the world, different from one another in size, color, or shape, and changeable by nature, are perceived by the eye. The eye itself, relatively speaking, is one and unchanging. The same is true of the other senses. Again, the eye is changing, with changing characteristics of keenness, dullness, or blindness, and then it is taken as the object, and the mind is the subject. Because the mind, relatively speaking, is a unity. Finally, the mind endowed with such changing characteristics as desire, doubt, determination, constancy, belief, fear, and fearlessness is the object, and is perceived by the self or consciousness, because the latter is a unity. Okay, have you followed this? On the one hand, the things we see are the objects, this table, the pews, the different people, the lights, and the eye, as it were, is the subject which perceives these things. And then we take the eye as the subject, and the mind, the eye as the object, and the mind as the subject. The mind perceives that, yes, the eye and the organ of vision is experiencing these things. But still, we have to take it one step further back. It is the mind then which becomes the object, and the true seer, the witness, the infinite consciousness, which is our true nature, is the subject. That is how we trace it back. And that's dealt in depth in the text, Drishya Viveka. That's the discernment between what is seen and who is the seer. But this is really here in this and the following mantras, that's exactly what is being dealt with here. So let us take this as our final meditation for the evening. Any comments, questions? All right, let's chant it a couple of times. Yan manasa namanute yenahur manomatam tadeva brahmatvam vidhi nedam yadidam upasate yan manasa namanute yenahur manomatam tadeva brahmatvam vidhi nedam yadidam upasate. Together. Yan manasa namanute yenahur manomatam tadeva brahmatvam vidhi nedam yadidam upasate. Yan manasa namanute yenahur manomatam tadeva brahmatvam vidhi nedam yadidam upasate. That which cannot be thought by mind, but by which, they say, mind is able to think. Know that alone to be the Brahman, not this which people worship here. The next ones, actually, I think will be comparatively easier, the last 3 verses, because it's a little more concrete. Say what we're hearing, what we're smelling, what we're seeing. It may be interesting to see when we'll have the next class. I don't know, when Maharaj goes on another trip. So. You have a question?
So my question is, while doing the meditation, I realized, like, when I do the neti procedure in the meditation, there, for a very brief time, I'm able to reach, like, I experience that there is a certain blankness that I hit against, and my question is there a way, like, what do you do after that blank? Like, you deny, okay, you're not the thought, you're not the breath, you're not the mind, the one who's thinking, you're not that. And then there comes a time when you hit this darkness, and the moment you deny that darkness, your thought again comes back. So then you again sort of go back from that blankness to the thinking stage. So there's this constant back and forth between mind thinking that there is blankness and that experience of blankness, but no idea of what to do once you hit that blankness. I don't know if this question is making sense, but
it sounds like this is not something we can discuss. So, because for each person, meditation will be his or her own experience. So I'm not sure that this is the best forum for discussing your personal practice, because what will be right for you may not be right for somebody else. But actually, this practice that we're doing, this jnana practice, it requires, to really be successful, I think, it requires a good deal of experience in meditation already. And judging by your age, maybe you haven't been meditating that long, just guessing by, So this is like a really great introduction, and there's a wonderful experience that you described of the first steps in this. I would say that very often we need a little bit of more awakening within, when the heart begins to open and we begin to find it easier to withdraw our mind into the heart, that this becomes a little bit more of a direct and easy way of meditation. And that comes through practice also. So that the place of devotion for opening our hearts and starting to learn to direct our minds within. And also learning to sit still for a long time without moving. And all of that plays a part in deepening our meditation. But thanks for sharing that. So we'll close with a prayer. Om asato ma sadgamaya tamaso ma jyotirgamaya mrityorma mritangamaya. Om shanti shanti shanti. From the unreal, lead us to the real. From darkness, lead us unto light. From death, lead us to immortality. Om, peace, peace, peace.